Away from Africa to the war in the Middle East, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has described the International Criminal Court's issuance of arrest warrants against him and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant as outrageous and anti-Semitic. It is the first time the court will issue a warrant for the leader of a Western ally. The move also represents the most dramatic step yet in the court's involvement in the war between Israel and Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the court's allegations are unfounded and they never committed crimes against humanity. He adds that the court action violates the natural right of democracies to defend themselves against murderous terrorism. And U.S. President Joe Biden has called on the ICC war crimes arrest warrant for the Israeli Prime Minister as outrageous. The ICC also issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu's now sacked Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and a Hamas commander, Mohammed Deif, who Israel says was killed in July. Judges said there were reasonable grounds to believe the three men bore criminal responsibility for crimes during the war between Israel and Hamas. Europe and the U.S. are split in their response to the warrant, with several European countries saying they respect ICC decisions. The British government said it respected the independence of the courts. For more on Prime Minister Netanyahu's arrest warrant and a lingering Gaza war, President Emeritus Corporate Council on Africa joins me from Washington, D.C. Good to have you join us. All right, so was joined by, just to mention that Stephen Hayes is joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. I want to begin with the issue around the deal that was reached by UN between, that's the ceasefire deal, which the U.S. is saying, look, it is outrageous. President Biden is saying that particular deal, the wording, doesn't include unconditional release of hostages, that it only states that there should be a ceasefire unconditionally. I want to get your response to that.
Well, I'm in favor of a ceasefire unconditionally because there were a lot of innocent people involved. Lebanon itself was not a party of the fight, and so I think that creates a major conflict. However, I think that the ceasefire is probably not going to happen until President Trump comes into office. Partly because I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, or largely because Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised a major gift for Trump when he arrives. So it's never been in the Prime Minister's interest to help Biden. He feels that Biden has not been fully on board at times with Israel, and I would debate that. Certainly he's expecting a very, very strong support from the United States, more direct support once President Trump comes in. So I think he's going to hold off on the ceasefire agreement, find reasons not to sign on. Yet our envoy Hochstein has said that he's very he's somewhat optimistic. Of course, we've expressed optimism throughout all this, and it hasn't really been fulfilled.
So you think that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it's going to deliberately stall or any kind of agreement, reaching any kind of agreement until January the 20th?
Deliberately is probably too strong of a word, even though it may be somewhat accurate. I think he'll look at it very carefully, put up new conditions as he has at times, and the unconditionality of it is a problem for Israel. So I don't expect a ceasefire. I hope I'm wrong until President Trump comes in, and then I think things will move very quickly.
But quickly for Israel, but not necessarily for Hezbollah and Hamas, because whatever deal would be reached while Trump is president might not work in the favor of Hamas and Hezbollah. How important is it for those parties to reach an agreement now before Trump is sworn in as president?
Well, Hezbollah has already signed on supposedly to the agreement, the proposed agreement, but they've put their own conditions. We're not sure what those conditions are as well. Three of the parts of the agreement are, as you say, binding for their point of view and can't be negotiated. So if Israel disagrees with any of those three or so points, and again, we're not clear on what those points are from either side because they've kept the points of the agreement very, very secretive as might be expected. So I think it's not going to work in Hezbollah's favor, but they have agreed to this. Israel has not yet agreed.
And let's talk about the arrest warrant, on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also on former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as well as Mohammed Deif, who is the former leader of Hamas. Israel said that he died since July. Well, let's speak on the one on Benjamin Netanyahu. Does this help the war in any way, or does this complicate the war?
I think it complicates it more than helps. I think it's a very complicated situation, far more than I think ICC has presented it as. On one hand, this war was started by Hamas. They've hidden behind civilians, mainly women and children, and unfortunately, 75% of the deaths in Gaza have been women and children. So, and at the same time, though, starvation is taking place. The aid to the civilian population has been deprived, slowed down by almost all observations, including some of our own government. And so I think it's a very, very complex situation. Clearly, Israel did not start this particular aspect of the war between Palestinians and Israel, but there have been some serious crimes that are defined as war crimes by the Geneva Convention. So I think it's going to be, but I think it complicates things. It's going to put a lot of pressure on ICC from countries like the United States, but others as well, and whether the ICC can continue over the long term is a question in my mind.
And just following through some countries who have decided to comply with the ICC ruling, for example, Italy, Netherlands, Canada, and Britain. I mean, it's surprising to see that the UK says it respects the ICC as an independent body. These are very strong, at least some of them are very strong allies of Israel. Mm-hmm. I mean, is this an indication of the ill will, as it were, of how Netanyahu has strained Israeli relations with some of his allies?
Well, I think it's clearly that I'm most surprised by Canada, frankly. But if you sign on to an agreement, you should hold to that agreement. All those countries have signed on to as members of ICC. The United States has not. Israel has not. But so they're simply saying that they're going to observe the agreement that they signed on to and are committed to it. But yes, it is. I think it is a reflection of the strain between Israel and the perception of what's happened in Gaza, and that's been a major issue for a lot of countries.
And what does this mean for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? His trips recently has mostly been to the U.S. anyway, where he has addressed. He has seen the president. He has spoken to Trump. Also, Vice President Kamala Harris, he's not necessarily make trips to other countries as much. Does this have any implication for him at all?
I mean, it limits his travel, but it doesn't limit him to his major ally, to the United States. I suspect that as soon as President Trump comes into office, that the Prime Minister of Israel will make a trip to the United States and be very, very well received. It's politically difficult for anybody to criticize Netanyahu in the United States at times because of the political alliance. So it's going to not affect his travel to the United States. Some countries have said that they will honor the arrest warrant, but France is ambivalent, for instance. So it's going to limit the countries, but I don't think he's going to particularly care which countries he can and cannot travel to.
And the elephant in the room basically is the direction that this war will take. If or when Trump becomes president in January, what steps do you see him taking? He had a plan for the Middle East in his first term, which was the Abraham Accords, and that was going well just before this particular conflict. Do you see him going in that direction? How do you see him going?
I do. I think he'll make the Middle East issue, as well as Ukraine, a priority. I think that he will anticipate, he'll give full support to Israel. The major impediment, as far as President Trump is concerned, I think, is Hamas and the Iran alliance of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis as well. So I think that he will see that as a major impediment that needs to be controlled, not eliminated, and so that you can move forward with a strong Saudi Israeli alliance as well. On the other hand, I think that the block to all this will be the Saudis. They have said that unless there's a two-state solution or a separate Palestinian state, they're not going to sign on to an agreement with the United States and others for a regional security pact. So this is something that President Trump would like. There's no secret that he would like to have the Nobel Peace Prize as well. He's made that very clear. And this would be a big step towards that. So I think he's going to put a lot of energy. His people are going to put a lot of energy into resolving this. But his new national security advisor, to be, has already condemned the ICC accord. And so you're going to see a very strong support for Israel.
Thank you so much for your time. Always interesting analysis. President Emeritus, Corporate Council on Africa, Stephen Hayes.
Thank you. It's an honor.